I don't record the video. Honestly, the video production stuff is like so over my head.
All right. Well, I was trying to look all glam for you and you don't even care.
I apologize for any unnecessary stress.
You're good. We're here now.
All right, cool. You ready to do this?
Game time.
All right, let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much. This week's audiobook recommendation is User-Friendly: How the Hidden Rules of Design Are Changing the Way We Live, Work, and Play by Cliff Kwong and Robert Fabricon. This book was recommended to me by my good buddy Ray. I really dug it. The book explores the impact of UX design on our daily lives, from shaping our behavior to our sense of identity. And the book is full of interesting anecdotes and analysis. They dive into some of the manipulative aspects of different interfaces, but also the potential for positive change through user-centered design. So it's a really great book. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/audible trial to start your free trial and download User-Friendly, completely free, and help support the show in the process. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, and John for their support. And if you want to join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, and John and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks for your support. So I'm really excited about today's show. I've got my buddy Steven Steiner on. Steven and I had a chat a couple weeks back. I can't even remember. And we got to talking. And we started talking about all kinds of stuff about people getting into the UX field and looking for help. How do you get help? Where do you go to get help? There's a lot of options out there. Steven had some really awesome insights. We're going to talk about that today. So Steven, I'm really excited. But first, Steven Steiner is a career coach for designers. He uses the right balance of industry, experience, rigor, and moral support to help designers tell their story. And as a designer by trade and a coach at heart, Steven's approach to coaching is rooted in design methodologies that meet designers where they are now, then help them to get where they want to be. He's passionate about helping designers unlock their full potential and achieve their individual career aspirations. Steven, welcome to Beyond UX Design, man. I am super stoked to have you. How's it going?
Yeah!
Look at he's awesome, as excited
Jeremy.
as me.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I'm super excited to be here. The work that you're doing with Beyond UX is fantastic. So I'm excited that you gave me a chance to be a part of your show and share a little bit more about how other designers can get the help that they feel like they're seeking out. So thanks for having me.
Man. Well, I only like to have people on that can add some real value, and I feel like we're going to do that today. So I really appreciate your insights here for sure. So Steven, you're a career coach. Tell us a little bit about that journey for you. How'd you get from UX designer or designer all the way into career coach for designers? A little bit of background. I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, so a lot of it goes into kind of what you just plugged in the intro, where I've very much been a kind of a coach at heart. So when I was 15 and a half, my first job was teaching swim lessons. So it's always been that idea of like, how do I productize my knowledge and be able to pay it forward to help other people be successful? And as I've built my career as a designer, I reached a certain height in the corporate ladder as an interim director. And I realized that that's not what I enjoyed doing, even though that's what society told me to do. So I took the path of realizing that what I really loved was helping people tell their story, figure out what they want to do. And that may or may not have been in the current employer that I was in. So the easiest way to help designers be successful is to be the third party where you're not actually working for the company that they're currently in, because that might not be the best path for them.
I love that. Oh, that's cool. So you've been doing that. You're like kind of coach since the wee age. I guess you were like 15?
Yeah,
14,
15
teenager, something like that. Hopefully. I don't know if I trust my kids to take lessons from anybody under 15. I don't know. Some people out there, who knows? So cool, man. So when you and I talked, we had a little chat a couple weeks back, like I said, and we got on this topic of just people getting into, design and they feel helpless. They feel like they are looking for help. They know they want to do this job. They know they want to get into the profession, but they aren't really sure where to start. And there's a lot of platforms out there that do different things. Some of them may be more helpful than others. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, what is your experience with people looking for help? What is the reason why they're coming to someone like you or anybody really to get help?
Yeah, so there's a handful of things that I've experienced or have people that I've interacted with that come look for help. There's kind of two parts of it. One of them is people seek validation, right? So whether if they're doing it right or not, they don't know until they get that validation from other people with a trusted opinion. So who are you getting help from? And then the other one is just, we don't know what we don't know. So like as humans in society, there's a learning curve in anything that we do. So if you are brand new to being a designer, if you're making a career transition, or if you've been in it for a while and you're like, where do I go next? That element of asking a trusted professional, of somebody who ideally has been where you want to be, can help you figure out what you might need to do next to get to that level.
And so I'm curious, you've been coach. Have you also done like a quote unquote mentor as well? There's obviously a difference there between coach and mentor. Do you have a background in both?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a progression of like, how do you want to show up, right? So everybody, I would say, in their career generally helps somebody at some point, whether if you're just a coworker giving feedback on something, a colleague, or if it is that aspect of a senior designer and maybe a more junior designer getting mentorship advice. The thing to pay attention to then becomes the sense of like cadence, right? So a lot of these mentoring platforms that exist out there, ADP probably being the biggest one, is this aspect of being like, oh yeah, sign up for one 30-minute session with me. And then it's like, okay, if you have that 30-minute session, how valuable is that for the actual, like for both people, but specifically the person who's seeking that mentorship?
So, it's funny, you mentioned ADP List specifically. I've been a mentor on there for the last couple of years. I can't remember. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the things, before I got into ADP List, I was actually mentoring with this platform called Black Valley. And this is a group out of the UK. Shout out to Leke. He's doing awesome things over there. And their goal is to help, Black tech talent, up and coming Black tech talent. It started out in London. It started out in the UK, and they branched out into other countries. But they help a lot of people in Africa. I know there's some folks in like Nigeria and Lagos and places like that. I've worked with some folks in Atlanta and New York and all that. And the way that they did it, I always kind of looked at this as sort of the example. They did cohorts. So the person that was getting mentored by me was part of a cohort, but they were doing other things. So when you talk about getting help, it was an 8-week course, and part of it was, some education, but then also they would assign each of these mentors one-on-one relationship for 8 weeks. I didn't meet with other people. They didn't meet with other people, and we got a chance to just kind of talk. And it was totally different from this 30-minute ad hoc, random encounter kind of thing that you're talking about there. And I'm kind of curious, just from your perspective, we talk about people needing help. And we talk about ADP List. I don't want to single them out because there's a lot of places to actually go and get help.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what, like from your perspective, like there's that kind of ad hoc coaching or ad hoc mentoring. I don't want to say coaching. There's more, I guess you might call it official coach, quote unquote coaching versus mentoring. There's these sort of cohorts that you could do, boot camps, things like that. Where can people go to kind of get help from your perspective? If I need help, where do I go?
I mean, you kind of just went through the list of them all. So I would say the ways to...
No, sorry.
No, you're good. The ways to break it down in terms of like where people might get help, it's really building relationships or building new relationships in a way where it's like you could go a career coaching route where you're looking at maybe a organized professional. There might be an element, like usually, at least what I do in career coaching is offer a free consult first to really see if we're a good fit, right? Like if you're making a commitment from the designer getting help, you're potentially making an investment in yourself, but then also the coach wants to make sure that they feel like it's a good relationship with who they're going to be working with, and it becomes mutually beneficial. So that's one way to do it. Depending on where you're at in your career, you could also potentially look at a manager. So if you have a trusted manager in your current organization or somebody that you have a relationship with, being able to seek out something beyond maybe what your day-to-day roles or responsibilities are supposed to be. So you might be able to get something there. Another way would be what you were just talking about, is that aspect of like mentorship. So like, is there an organization that you can get involved in? Is there a group that you can sign up for to have ideally reoccurring sessions with the same person? Because what you're looking at is through building a relationship, you build respect and know how that person works over time. So if you just have a one-off speed dating type conversation, who's to say that you're getting consistently the right type of feedback for what you need to be successful? And then the last one would just be really looking at peers, right? So like, is there somebody that you trust, whether if they're above you in terms of experience, below you in terms of experience, equal with you in terms of experience? All of those different areas could help you level up your story or level up your skill set where you might feel that you want more help.
Yeah. So question about this. You mentioned speed dating. This is sort of something I've kind of seen proliferate, maybe is the right word. I don't know, on LinkedIn recently, where people talk, I found a mentor. I'm a mentor. I'm now mentoring, and it's like this official thing. I'm a mentor and I'm a mentee. I guess we've already mentioned ADP List, but there's other platforms that do a similar thing where I sign up for an ad hoc meeting. I talk to somebody for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then that's it. It is a lot like speed dating, isn't it? It's funny because I don't know. What do you get out of that? I don't know. I'm curious, like from your perspective, obviously as a coach, like you're working to build a relationship with somebody. So I would imagine your perspective is those speed dating, quote unquote, speed dating platforms are probably not super beneficial. But I'm wondering if you could talk to that a little bit.
So yeah, the idea of kind of speed dating and using these types of like fast ad hoc sessions, although I don't have direct experience, I talk to a lot of designers regularly who start there. And what ends up happening is that imagine yourself as a designer, and those of you who listen to the podcast probably can relate to this, as a designer going on one of these experiences and being like, yes, I want feedback. You talk to 5 different designers who have 5 different career journeys, 5 different perspectives, and they give you 5 different pieces of advice. One of them might be have the blue background, don't have a blue background, remove the text, add the text. And then you're like sitting there, if you're newer to the career field and you're not exactly sure where you want to go next, you're hoping that that person who has made it, quote unquote, whatever that means to you or them, gives you the advice that you need. Well, if you get conflicting advice from conflicting people consistently, all those people are right. I don't think they're trying to tell you anything that they don't feel is the right thing to say. It's just may or may not be what you need to be successful or consistent with where you're trying to go next. Because it's that element of like, as the mentor, I want to get help and I want to be able to provide help. And like, I want to feel like I'm doing the right thing. But then as the mentee, you don't know what you don't know, and you're hoping that you get answers. And as you get conflicting opinions, you become a sponge of chaos. And those are the ones who usually come to me and they're like, all right, Steven, I've heard a lot of good things. I don't know where to go next. Like, I don't know which way's up anymore. Do I keep it blue? Do I change the text? And most of the time, that's telling me what matters because they're not invested in what does that person want to do next, which is what I focus on first.
It's funny because like I said, I've been on ADP List. I actually have recently just decided I'm kind of done with ADP List for various reasons. I'm not talking about it today, but I found that it was just sort of monotonous for me as a quote unquote mentor. And it's funny because I use that. I always say mentor in quotes when I talk about ADP List because I don't really feel like I'm mentoring anybody. Although there are people that I have met through ADP List that I feel like are turning into those relationships, but they've evolved past that ad hoc 30-minute, 45-minute random session.
Sure.
So, it's interesting because like when I first started ADP List, I didn't realize that I could change my settings to limit the number of sessions. So I was getting like 10, 15 sessions, and I didn't have my calendar up to date. And I was like, this is like, I can't handle this. And every session was identical, which is crazy to me. Every single session was like, I need help with my portfolio. Can you review my portfolio? That was basically every single one.
Sure.
And I'm just like thinking to myself, how am I going to give you accurate feedback on your portfolio if I have absolutely zero context about the companies you're trying to apply to, the job that you're trying to get, your work experience, like, are you senior, junior? I don't have any idea. I could give you my opinion on your case study, but It's totally irrelevant, my opinion. What matters is the context and the information that I'm giving you. And it was funny because when you said speed dating, I was like, yes, it felt so much like I'm trying to find the right mentor. Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? And I don't know. I've always felt that was sort of just like a weird relationship. Some of the relationships that I've had, or some of the conversations that I've had on ADP List they were weird. They were very weird. Some of them have been wonderful, and I've made some, I think, really good friends along the way out of how many other sessions I've done? 100-something sessions. 5 of them have stuck, which is sad when you think about it.
And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you both go into it with the same perspective, right? So being able to build 5 solid relationships, or maybe that conversation goes outside of the current platform and becomes something more long. Like, as a designer potentially looking to get help, not knowing who to get help from, maybe you go with that perspective. Maybe you go on, and because I've also heard stories where a couple of designers go on and like see the speed dating, but instead of being like, I want portfolio feedback, they ask a bunch of like the same types of interview questions, right? Like, who are you? What are you doing? How could we help? And like that type of thing, to like they see it as a chance of vetting who they might want to go offline with, versus this like, give me portfolio feedback, give me portfolio feedback. Because like, if you imagine you were having the same conversation, how many different senior designers were they talking to get a perspective who didn't ask the questions that you're asking, right? Because they don't know, they didn't try to think of what is that person trying to accomplish next, but like, oh, I need to add value right now. Let me give this person a portfolio review. Whenever designers come to me, whether if it's a LinkedIn message or any concept of like, hey, Steven, can you give me feedback on a portfolio? My initial response is no, not yet. Because I don't know what you're trying to do. So my feedback may or may not be helpful to you.
Yeah.
Because like your portfolio looks terrible if you want to be an engineer, right? Like you're not you're not going to get a job at McDonald's with that portfolio. Like, what are you trying to do?
Yeah, you'll never get a job as a surgeon with this thing.
Yeah, right? Like this is garbage.
I love that you mentioned that because I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations where people signed up with me on ADP lists specifically to get portfolio advice. And we never got there because I always say the same thing. You know, I could give you advice. I could tell you my opinion, but let's talk about you first. Why are you here?
Yeah, which is great.
Why are you here? And what is it you're hoping to get out of this? And where do you want to go? And where do you want to be? And all these things and turn it, I guess, more into like almost like a psychotherapy session, I guess, in a way. But, you know, I always say like, you know, set up more time and we'll go through your portfolio next time. And I can't tell you how many times people just never signed up again, never even reached out, never connected with me or anything. And it was just like, that's such a waste. Like I got to meet a cool person, I guess. But what did you get out of that? I don't know. It's just weird.
Yeah. I love that you say that. I get the same thing to where when people are like, hey, can you feedback on my portfolio? I'll say, no, I don't do that without context. And then they go away.
Yeah.
If I were a designer who was somebody who was like, no, I want more context first, that's the person you want to talk to, right? Like they're invested and care about your journey and not this element of like, I asked you a question, give me an answer. Let me figure out how confusing I'm going to be. Right? Like,
you know what that reminds me of? Do you have kids? You have kids, right? No kids.
I don't.
You don't have kids? I can't remember. Okay, you don't have kids. I have kids. And what it reminds me of is when my kids are looking for something. You know, they lost a toy or their shoe. Yeah. And the first thing they say is, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, where's my shoe? And I say, I don't know. Where's the last place you had your shoe? You know, and I'm like, I don't know where your shoe is. Instead of them going and look for the shoe themselves, you know, they come to someone else and ask them to do the work for them.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm guilty of that. I was guilty of this. Actually, I still do this with my wife. I'm like, hey, babe, you see my thing? You know, my watch? Where's my wallet? She's like, I don't keep track of your stuff. But, you know, same kind of thing, though. I feel like it's like people don't want to do the work often. They want someone to tell them what to do. They want someone to do the work for them. And in that case, like, I question what you're going to get out of that mentor session in the first place, other than maybe a checklist of things to change in your portfolio.
And I think that goes both ways. When I have the free consults with any of you listening to this conversation, like when you have those free consults or when you get to know somebody for the first time, see if it's the relationship that you want. To where I've had designers who come to me in these free consults and like, what are you going to do for me? And it's like, as a coach, my job is not to do any of the work for you specifically. It's to work with you to figure out where you want to go next and help you build a story that you can own and be authentically you, right? Like I can't do that for you because I'm not you. However, there's some designers who are like, give me very specific feedback on what I need to do next. And it's like, that's not the time or place for this. And we're not a good relationship, right? Like I don't say yes to every person I talk to all the time because I want to make sure it's a mutually beneficial dynamic where their investment is something that I feel like I can deliver on.
Now, this is somewhat off topic,
sure,
but I just thought of this and it's interesting because these people they're trying to get UX designer jobs. And part of our job, I think the main part of our job is problem solving more than anything else, right? Like, yes, it's to create pretty designs. And yes, it is to create, you know, wireframes and prototypes and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is to solve problems. And it's kind of ironic that a UX designer or someone who wants to be a UX designer, an aspiring UX designer, is looking for answers as opposed to trying to solve the problem on their own. And it's kind of telling some of those people. I wonder how successful a lot of those people that are doing that will actually be if they will even get the job at all.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I look at it as designers, our job is to sell ourselves as the product that employers are paying for, right? So if we become the product that they're paying for, we need to tell our story in terms of features and benefits and value that they feel like it's worth investing in. For the same reason why you're not going to buy something off the shelf or download an app or use any sort of experience and pay for it if it doesn't give you the perceived value that you want. So if you go to a website or someone's like, hey, download this thing, and you can't figure out why it's worth the investment, you're probably not going to pay for it. Also similar to like going with your friends and being like, hey, I want to go to a movie. If all of your friends are like, yeah, movie sounds great, and nobody picks anything, you're not interesting versus being like, I really want to go see, I don't know what movie is just in theaters right now, but it's like, I really want to go see like this brand new, like hot movie. Then your friends can say yes or no, because you're giving them something to react to. So as you're applying for a job or as you're telling your story, if you are a designer who is focused on being an artist versus maybe being an architect or a strategist, you now give a potential employer something to react to see if you are the right fit for their team or not.
So question. All right. So a minute ago, we talked a lot about the various ways that you can get help. Coaches, managers, yes. Mentors. I think you mentioned like peers and things like that. It's interesting because a lot of times when people think of mentor or they think of coach, I have to go and find a very specific mentor or a very specific coach, a person who identifies as a mentor or identifies as a coach. And what's really interesting is that a lot of times managers, peers, these are just organic relationships where you get a lot of value out of them. But it's kind of funny because I imagine a lot of these people, they would never consider themselves to be quote unquote mentor. It's just a relationship that kind of evolves over time. And I think a lot of people, when they see these platforms that are screaming, I'm a mentor platform, they just assume that that's the only place to go to get that kind of help versus there's probably some people in your life already that would probably be a better fit to give you more realistic and actionable help. So I don't know, could you talk about that a little bit? Because I find that fascinating that junior designers just gravitate towards the web app versus where they already are.
And I would reframe that a little bit towards not just junior designers, right? So the industry uses this phrase, junior designers. I see it as like, where are you at in your design journey and what type of feedback do you want? Like there are some designers who I coach they have more professional experience than I do relative to the craft of being a designer. They just are lacking the skills that I could help them kind of uncover. So it's not just a junior designer. It's like, where are you at and what are you seeking help on? Not to completely throw you off. I felt like that was worth clarifying to where it's not like this isn't only like a junior senior dynamic, but it's like, where are you at in your career and what can you do next? So
that's a great clarification.
So then looking for that, like who can you build relationships with, or like how do you seek out those relationships? A lot of the way that I would recommend designers doing that, and when I talk to people who are trying to seek out what fits for their budget and lifestyle, is that element of like, who are the people in your life that do what you want to do? And then ask questions of like, how do you do it? I don't know if you've ever seen what's the Will Smith movie where he does...
Fights the aliens? What's the...
One where he goes around and like sells x-ray machines.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. I don't know the name, but funny story. My wife and I used to do t-shirt design, like New Orleans inspired t-shirts.
Yeah.
And our t-shirts were in that movie. They like bought a bunch of our t-shirts to use in that movie. Yeah. They filmed a lot of it in New Orleans. Anyway, sorry, really cool. I don't remember the name of it. I just know that
That's super cool. It is.
Unless it's a totally different movie that I'm thinking of.
No, it probably is the same one.
If I knew more Will Smith movies, I would just throw out a bunch of random names of other movies, but I don't even know. Other
Men
than
in Black.
Men in Black. What's that one where he's with Martin Short, where they're like FBI agents? What's that in Miami?
Bad Boys?
Bad Boys!
No, that's not Will Smith. Yeah, it is Bad Boys.
The Pursuit of Happiness.
The Pursuit of Happiness. Yeah, there we go. So it's kind of, when you're seeking help or when you're trying to get advice from somebody that is where you've been, just like how Will Smith in the Pursuit of Happiness movie has the question of like, what do you do and how do you do it? And that is a quote that's kind of stuck with me in a way to where you're like, okay, if you work with somebody or if a family friend or somebody in your immediate network does something that impresses you, don't be afraid to ask, what do you do and how do you do it? And giving that an open-ended question, because everybody loves to talk about themselves, giving it a chance to be curious about their career path and see like, okay, how can you go deeper? Like as designers, our job is to understand customer problems, as you said earlier, and kind of figure out like, how do we approach that? So if we see it as like, oh, that person does what I want to do, it's almost like a gap analysis of your own career.
Right.
I mean, like, what do you do and how do you do it? And as you learn more, think selfishly if that's what you want to be doing, or if you can take kind of inspiration from their journey to improve your own story.
And treat it more of like, just organic kind of relationship building. I think that's sort of where a lot of people, I don't want to say fail, but maybe go wrong. I don't even know if go wrong is the right way to describe it, but they'll say, will you be my mentor? Like it's an official thing, like handshake, now I'm your mentor. But it's more just like, I think you're saying is like, find those people, I don't know, take them to coffee or buy a coffee, or if you work with them, sit down with them at lunch in the break room. If you are in office or remote, hey, can we schedule 30 minutes? I'd love to learn more about you, and treating it more like that's just sort of organic kind of internal networking kind of a thing, versus official question, because I feel like that would just make, if someone asked me that, I'd feel sort of awkward, to be honest. Like, will you be my mentor? I don't know. I just feel like that's just such a I don't know, a weird thing to ask somebody.
I remember, it's funny you say that, because I did, so years ago, at General Assembly, I did their like free sessions, or like I got involved with a few different General Assembly classes. And I had a couple of General Assembly students at the time come up to me and they're like, hey, I was told to find a mentor. Would you be my mentor? So exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Which my response was like, what do you want out of this relationship? Like, what's expected of me in this relationship? Like, just to say I have a mentor, check, and we never meet is a weird, like, that's not a mutually beneficial relationship. Like, you get nothing out of that. So they're like, oh no, I was told to find a mentor and you seemed like you'd be a good person to help me. And this was pre-pandemic, because when I was able to do like in-person sessions. So let's say like it was 2019, 2018. And they were just like, I was told to be a mentor. Can you be my mentor? It's like, I could. I don't know what you want from me though. Versus what you're talking about, like the most influential person in my professional career, who I still have a fantastic relationship with, was my first real design manager. He saw a young, driven person who didn't really know where I was going, but I asked a lot of really good questions. And he is still the most influential person. I've not worked for this guy since 2012. And I talk to him regularly. Like, that's fantastic. Awesome. But it was never like, you want to be a mentor? It's like, yeah, we believe in each other and we both see value in what this relationship is.
So a couple of things. You mentioned the mutually beneficial piece. I want to hit on that in a second. But what you're reminding me of is I had an episode a while back, a couple of weeks ago with Megan Thomas, but we talked about networking and how to use LinkedIn the wrong way. You may have seen the post she did a couple of weeks ago about, this person sent them basically like asked her to write a novel for her. I'm reminded of essentially the same thing where I was told to network. So here I am networking. Here's my list of questions. And it's a sort of like this idea of like some of these people in boot camps following the word of the rule, but not the spirit or the word of the ask, but not the spirit of the ask,
Sure.
Going out and doing it. I see very similar things there. And I wouldn't be surprised if these were the same people getting input from the same instructors or something, telling them to do both of these things.
Yes, although I think there's an element of giving the designer some ownership in what they're choosing to do, right? So very similar to my approach is to meet you where you're at and figure out like, where do you want to go next? And I fully believe that people are doing what they feel is right without knowing what they don't know about how it's maybe perceived. Because I also got a message shortly around the same time that Megan's post went viral of this guy who was like, hey, I just recently graduated from this university, like a true university, like not a boot camp program. It's like he has this 4-year degree. And he was like, I'm trying to get help. Like, can you answer? And then he like gives me 14 questions in a row. And that was also a post where I screenshotted it, made a thing where it's like, don't do this. Here is what kind of went wrong. Because you don't know what you don't know. And just bashing them, which Megan didn't do. Megan Thomas's post is fantastic in a way that's like, this is what this person did, and I tried to help them. They just weren't willing to take the help. And it's like, okay, as a designer, if you're reaching out to professionals who you respect or want feedback on, know that it has to be mutually beneficial dynamic and take that feedback in a way that's like very similar to, can you give me portfolio feedback? And if your response is not exactly the portfolio feedback that they wanted, like, that's okay. Those are the people that you want to be talking to.
And I think that's something too, like we talked about this with Megan, is this idea of critical thinking. Like being able to take that advice that you get and process it and understand what applies. Because sometimes with feedback in general, I mean, in work, as UX designers, we get feedback. That doesn't mean we need to apply the feedback. We might do nothing with the feedback. We don't have to do anything with the feedback.
Yeah.
We could just say, that's great feedback. Thank you for the feedback. It doesn't apply here. I'm not going to use it. So, part of that too is that critical thinking piece. You mentioned something before, by the way. I just pictured in my head, sponge of chaos. I just imagine that being like just an amazing sticker. If anybody out there can illustrate this, I imagine like a sponge on fire, almost like a SpongeBob SquarePants with like just fire coming out or something. I don't know. Anyway, nuclear explosions. I don't know. Sponge of chaos is just a great visual in my head. I just love that. I love that idea. But anyway, being able to take that feedback though and not turn into chaos is something that I feel like part of this relationship. It's not just you asking questions and getting it and blindly following it. Part of you being a mentee is to take that feedback and understand what applies and what doesn't. And I think a lot of people are missing that.
Yeah, what you want to adopt, like what you want to take and leave. And it's okay because it's your journey, right? Like there is no one size fits all. Academia has told us 1 + 1 is 2 that formula doesn't necessarily exist when you start to build your career path.
So I got a question for you. We talked about this. I think we talked around it a little bit, but let's explicitly maybe call it out. This idea of mentor versus quote unquote mentor, like from one of these platforms we talked about. From your perspective, what is a real mentor? And compare that and contrast that, if you could, to maybe like a quote unquote mentor.
So starting out with the quote unquote, because I think it's easier to get specific on that, based off of what we've talked about through this episode and experience in general, the idea of a quote unquote mentor in relationship to something like a speed dating environment would be somebody who you could get feedback from, just not as consistently, in a way where it's like, yeah, I'm a mentor. I said a few things and I never interact with that person again. I would say that is the dynamic. Is that how you would interpret it also?
Yeah. To me, a mentor is like a relationship. You can't have a relationship with one meeting, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be some continuous conversation, whether that's through LinkedIn comments or messages or whatever. A lot of these people that I've met, I don't have their phone numbers or, things like that. But we keep in touch,
sure.
And there's a relationship there, even if it is, through social media and stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's what I would, yeah. So like so from your perspective, the quote unquote mentor is that kind of like ad hoc, one-off speed dating kind of thing. Whereas a mentor can almost be anything. Like it doesn't even have to be like UX design. It could be.
Absolutely. So yeah, I know we keep getting around the question. So that to validate what you just said, the aspect of a quote unquote mentor being compared to consistency of the relationship, right? So like if it is one or two off speed dating type conversations, yes, that was a mentor exchange potentially, but is it really a real mentor where you have mutual investment in where's that relationship going, in a sense of seeking advice or sharing your journey together, is how I would draw the line.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. I like that way to describe it. And it's also, too, I think it's worth noting that we're talking about mentors in the sense of UX design and career for UX designers specifically. But you could have a mentor that helps you with things like career pathing in general. They don't have to be a UX designer to help you, level up as far as like, talking to a manager, talking about negotiating salary, talking about, I don't know, all kinds of stuff, 401k or retirement planning, whatever. I mean, there could be like mentoring in any number of things, dealing with a bad boss, dealing with difficult coworkers. People that give you advice in that situation don't necessarily have to be UX designers. They could be for sure, but it could be somebody else that just has experience working with other people in a corporate setting that could give you advice. Right. So anyway, it's kind of interesting to think about. Like, I know we talk about mentoring as far as like UX goes, but we don't limit it to that, I guess is what I would say. So question from your perspective, coach versus mentor, what's the overlap there? And how do you distinguish between the two? How do you differentiate between one and the other? Is there some specifics?
Yes. So in terms of coaching, that is also an industry that doesn't have clear governance. Although there are a few organizations, International Coaching Federation is probably the biggest one if there was a governing body, and in terms of like where that line gets drawn. So me as a coach, I went through yes, my career as a designer has given me most of the skills that I have that I'm able to add value to designers today. However, in addition to that, I also went and got certified as a coach, which means that I went through the International Coaching Federation training program to understand what it means to be a true coach and how that industry is identified. And the aspect of coaching in its truest sense is meeting somebody where they're at and working through questions to help them identify where they want to go next. I bridge the gap a little differently because I have career experience as a designer. I know what it takes to be successful as a designer. So I might give feedback that is a little bit more on the mentorship side at times versus true coaching, which is questioning and getting the individual who's being coached to uncover the answers that they might not have been able to find for themselves.
So any advice on when, as a person looking for help, when might you go to one versus the other?
I don't have a good answer for that question.
Okay, that's fair.
Seek where you think you can get advice from. To answer your question around coaching versus mentoring and where to seek what, I would say it looks into what feels comfortable to you. So you talked a lot about mentors. Where can you find mentors? What can you do with them? If you don't feel like you have built a relationship or have somebody in your immediate network that can help you make incremental progress, seeking a coach or an industry professional who has been where you want to be could give you what you need to fill that gap. And I say where it's better you want to be on purpose because there are plenty of career coaches or career services offerings that exist through people who might not have been where you want to be. And that's honestly where I came into it and where my premium kind of lays is that aspect of when you go through boot camp programs, which I've taught them, I've been involved with some of them, but I've also taught a couple of courses, actually the same class that Megan Thomas teaches, to bring that back.
Oh, cool. Wow.
I taught that class in 2018.
I had no idea. Right on. A small world.
So like to bring that full circle, that aspect of it is like seeing the career services that were provided by people who aren't actually designers is like, yeah, not all UX roles are the same, right? It's like being able to identify the differences, being able to figure out what is the right journey to tell is important. So when you seek out a career coach, find somebody who actually has the experience that tells the industry knowledge. So you're not just getting generic, oh, all resumes should look this way, or all portfolios need to check these 3 boxes. It's like, well, maybe it doesn't if that's not the right path for you.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, it's hard to say. I'm sure like everybody's individual scenario is probably different. And
Sure.
what one person may get out of a coach might be not the same as what someone else gets out. It's vice versa with a mentor, right? So anyway, that's one quick question. Is it mentor or mentor? What do you pronounce it?
I think it's where you got geographically, right? Like tomato.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I sometimes I say mentor and then I'm like mentor. I don't know. Sometimes I pronounce the O.
I don't know. And sometimes Washington has an R, so I don't know. Washington.
I love it. All right, so last big question here. When you think about mentor platforms, because they are out there, and I don't want to bash them all and say that they're useless, I think you can get good value out of them. What are some tips that you might have for people who are trying to use a mentorship platform, but use them in the most effective way possible?
Awesome question. If you are a designer or anybody for that matter who's interested in this space and wants to use a mentorship platform in a way that's beneficial, I would recommend you go in it with the lens of who am I talking to and how could this be mutually beneficial, right? So showing up saying, I just want portfolio feedback is likely not a mutually beneficial dynamic from the feedback that you're going to receive or the person who's going to be giving feedback. To your example specifically, Jeremy, of like, yeah, that's what they start with. And then I kind of pivot to like, before I give you that feedback, let's do the research and discovery first. So in a first conversation with a complete stranger, going in there, almost treating it like an interview for a job. And just figuring out like, okay, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Where are you going? Like, what do you do and how do you do it? And then trying to understand together how it might be a mutually beneficial relationship. Because then you're going in and treating them like humans that may or may not be able to help you. Because you don't know. Like just because you're a senior designer and the person who wants the feedback is maybe looking to do something different, who's to say that that's the feedback you want to listen to?
Now, you mentioned before, we talked about the sponge of chaos. I love that visual, by the way. When you go and you get a bunch of advice from different people and it's conflicting and you end up just like taking all this conflicting advice in, do you recommend trying to limit the number of people that you actually meet with on these platforms? Or do you recommend like a scattershot across the board, seeing what works and what sticks, and then maybe getting, trying to build a long-term relationship? Or what are your thoughts there? You have any advice?
It's gonna be such a case-by-case thing where if you get a lot of conflicting opinions, asking about the rationale on why. So versus saying, you should remove the blue background. Cool, I'm gonna go do a thing. You're lacking the rationale on like, should you ever remove the blue background? Is it applicable to your story or just that person's opinion? So great, thanks for your feedback. Can you help me understand why or what is giving this feedback, or like what's behind the feedback might be the way to do it. And then as you start gathering different people's perspectives, you might be able to understand, okay, I want to keep the blue background because their rationale is different than the journey I was trying to tell.
One thing I've noticed people do that I would advise against doing is I've come across people in my journeys that have specifically told me they were looking for a job at a company, and they will go on ADP list and find someone that works at that company with the specific goal of trying to get a foot in the door there. And I think that's okay to do that as long as you're not going into these asking for something, right? Just like on LinkedIn, you don't go in and just start, well, what are you looking for? Can you send me a referral? Can you tell me how to get a job there? Can you put me in touch with a recruiter? It's more of like, what is it like working there? How do you feel about working there? What is the culture like? Do you like working there? That kind of thing. And let that relationship kind of evolve. And if it is a good fit, let that person refer you on their own without you asking for it. So that's something I just want to like kind of call out. I've seen people do that, and I'm like, kind of on the fence about that because I don't feel like that's what that platform is really for. It's not for, getting a job necessarily as much as it is for getting help, like you said. I don't know. You have any thoughts about that? Do you have any opinions one way or another about that?
I would agree with you, right? Like, how weird is it if you want a first date with somebody and like, so we're gonna get married or what? It's like, I don't even know what your name is, right? Like,
yeah.
So it's a similar concept of date them before you, like date before marriage. So yes, seeking out people who work at an employer that you potentially want to work at, very strategic, great, go do that. Don't push your opinion or your ask right away, build a relationship. Because what if that person ends up being somebody that you don't want to endorse you, right? Sure. Like what if it's like, I don't really want my name attached to Jeremy. Like, it's fine.
He's a real bum.
Yeah, right? But like, and then he submits you and they're like, you didn't know that he has a terrible like company culture and he was about to quit anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So like understanding who that person is and is it somebody that, going back to mutually beneficial, that person is going to endorse you or choose to endorse you means that they're putting their own clout on the line. And I personally would not refer or endorse somebody if I don't feel like I'm willing to put my brand behind you because we're both at risk. If you end up doing something terrible, I also look bad. So like realizing that it's a connection that needs to keep going and don't ask like, what if you want a first date with somebody? You're like, hey, you want to get married? And that like serial killer is like, yeah, we got to get married quick because you didn't know that they were about to do something terrible. And now you're like, like now I'm financially attached to this person.
Yeah, we got to do it quick. Tomorrow's a full moon and I got to get this done.
Yeah, right? Like, or they might be like millions of dollars in debt. And you're like, yeah we got married because it was great. They did like a Britney Spears wedding in Vegas. Anyway, new topic.
All right. Well, on that note, Stephen, anything else that we didn't get a chance to talk about today that you feel like is important for some of these folks out there looking for help?
To summarize, before we get into your lightning round here, which I feel is coming next. I would summarize.
It's like you listened. I don't know.
I don't know your episodes at all. What are you talking about? Love your show. Still here. All right.
Thanks,
so when we talk about assessing effectiveness for designers to get help, look at who you're surrounded by and are there people who do what you want to do or do something that you could learn from? Stay curious. What do you do and how do you do it? If you feel that there are people or if you feel that you're not able to get from your immediate network what you might need help with, look for ways to build relationships with people that you can have mutually beneficial dynamics. If you do start by doing a quote unquote mentorship relationship on a big platform, know what you're signing up for. Or if you want to seek out career coaching from a more structured potential approach, there are career coaches, plugging myself and others, who offer services to help you uncover what you don't know, or invested in you in a way that's telling your story because it's what you want to be successful and not just what industry best practices are supposed to be for a cookie cutter resume, LinkedIn profile, portfolio, or whatever else you might do. Or if you're in your current job and you're like, I want to level up my story, where do I go next? Reaching out to people who have climbed the corporate ladder or have been in the position that you want to be in will give you an opportunity to uncover what you don't know. And hopefully that gives this episode a bit of a summary with all of the tangents that Jeremy and I went through related to that of like, hang out, reach out.
We tend to
like,
do that. Yeah.
I offer free consults on purpose because I want to make sure that's a mutually beneficial relationship. There have been designers that I have turned away because I don't feel like we would be helpful together. I'm not here to take your money. I'm here to help you tell your story in a way that's mutually beneficial, and currency is involved in that.
Yeah, that's just part of it. Yeah, you gotta make it worth your while. You know what I mean? Cool. All right, Stephen. Well, that was awesome, man. I love that. This is such a great thing. And again, I just want to make sure I'm making very clear. I'm not bashing the mentor platforms necessarily. I think people can use them in a very great way. I have met a ton of awesome people, amazing people from those platforms. So they are doing some good. It's not like they're doing bad or anything. It's just people using them, I think, in ways that probably aren't as beneficial as they could be. So I just want to throw that out there. I don't know how you feel about them necessarily. You might have some really strong opinions, but I haven't had bad experiences necessarily. I'm not on them anymore for other reasons, but
I would say it's also kind of like Craigslist. Like you can't say Craigslist is a terrible platform because there's some sketchy people on it.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Like it's as good as the quality of the people who build the relationships.
All right. So, Steven, you got time to stick around? Got a few questions I like to ask all my guests. I don't know. It's like you knew that was coming. Real quick, just a few things. You got time? You got a few minutes?
Absolutely. I hang out
all right.
till the end, man.
Right on. All right. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
So this question is going to evolve because favorites change. So my favorite book at the moment, which has been really helpful recently, is a book called Insights by Tasha Eurich.
Okay.
I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly. She does a fantastic job of talking about insights being a way that we show up. So what is our internal self-awareness as well as external self-awareness for how we might want to take on the world?
Cool.
It's called Insights. Fantastic. Not a design book. It does a great perspective on like how you might perceive yourself and how others might perceive you.
Still though, I feel like there's a lot that you could get out of that. You would most likely apply in a professional setting.
Oh,
if
absolutely.
Not UX, with psychology and stuff behind
absolutely.
UX. Yeah.
It's just not like
that's awesome.
The design of everyday things or
right on.
like
that counts. It counts. You don't have to validate it. I get it. I'm not trying to.
So these are. I would say it's a non-design specific book.
Yeah, that's perfect, man. I love it. All right, cool. What is your favorite non-design podcast?
So a few podcasts that are entertaining to listen to, non-design. So I have 3 recommendations on this one. The first one that I've been listening to for years, probably since it first came out, is Smart Passive Income by Pat Flynn. So it's very much an entrepreneurial podcast, although as Pat Flynn's career has continued to grow, he continues to provide a ton of value in the Smart Passive Income community. And then non-business or professional related at all, there's a podcast called Gossip, I think is what it's actually called. I learned it through a friend of a friend, but it's basically like an episode, like each episode just talks about a gossip story and then they like dissect it with a guest. So it's silly, but it's entertaining.
Reality TV for podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just like a gossip story. You're like, it's terrible, but it's hilarious. So there's that. And then the third one is just like another one. NPR has Wait, Don't Tell Me, which is another game show, but it's NPR. So it's usually news related. So I love me some game shows of any kind. Like I still watch syndicated game shows from like the 70s or 80s just because it's still a game show.
My wife and I went to Chicago a few years back. This is I guess longer than that, before we had kids, and we tried to get tickets to Wait, and they were sold out. It was like impossible to get tickets, but I would have loved to do that. But anyway, good stuff. All right, what is your favorite meal? And this could be anything you've cooked, meal you've eaten at a restaurant, could be something your grandma cooked, whatever you consider a meal.
So I would say my favorite meal in general, anything that involves pasta. It doesn't matter the ethnicity of it, but if noodles and pasta are involved, I'm game. Like it could be pad thai, it could be spaghetti. It doesn't matter what. Like it could be like chow mein. It doesn't matter if it involves noodles. Put me in, coach.
Have you perfected your slurp, your noodle slurp?
Lady of the Tramp style. If there's somebody on the other side.
Could be somebody on the other end of the noodle. I don't know. Just whatever.
Only if there's somebody on the other end of the noodle. Other than that, I don't generally try to do that. Not really well received in restaurants.
It depends. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like or maybe it's slurping soup in Asia. It's considered polite, I think, to slurp. So it all depends on the cultural context. There you go. See, it's the same as before. It all depends on the context. All right. What is your favorite vacation spot? Somewhere with noodles, I assume.
So my favorite vacation spot, I wouldn't say it's a specific location. I'm definitely ocean over forest, right? So if you put me on the water, open water is like even now, like sometimes I'll just go to the coast just to be in more of a open free space. So there's not like a city, but it's like ocean over forest all day.
Yeah, dude, I love that. I'm a huge beach town guy. I love a good beach town. It could be on the ocean, it could be on a lake. Something with like a little town with some kind of restaurant over the water or something like that with boats around. That's my thing. I'm with you on that. All right. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
Yeah. So my favorite tool is Excel. Excel, Google Sheets.
Explain that one.
Any sort of table-based platform. So originally it was Excel, and then Google Sheets has become more popular depending on who your employer is. Because in the world of design, I am more of the architect and the strategist versus the artist.
Right. That's fair. Yeah,
using things like Excel, I'm able to organize and plan out content hierarchy, strategy of like organization of information.
I see where you're going with this.
A bunch of different columns to provide sortable rows, like all of that stuff. Like right now, my current design contract that I'm on, we're doing a massive assessment of over 800 attributes, and like doing that in any sort of like Canvas style platform wouldn't work because you can't sort it or organize it or like group it or figure out like what's required versus not required. So all that stuff, like I will spend all day in Excel over a design tool.
All right. Yeah. First, when you said design tool, you're like, Excel. I'm like, what? And then it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. I love it. All right. So, Steven, that's it for me for today, man. Anything you want to plug? Talk about your business. Give yourself a little plug here, man.
Sweet. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. Super awesome. I love what you're doing with Beyond UX. You continue to grow a great presence in the audience. Honored to be a part of it. And in terms of people listening to the show and want to potentially build a relationship with me, see if I'm the right fit for you, careercoachfordesigners.com is my primary domain. You could also find me on LinkedIn. Name is Steven Steiner. And then I imagine this stuff will be in some sort of a show notes on Career Coach for Designers. You can look at what I'm doing, look at how I can help. I have a whole page dedicated to the approach. And then also take me up with the opportunity for a free consult. It's a low risk, super easy dynamic. See how I might be able to help you tell your story or what we might be able to do to help you get the fit that you deserve. Because it may or may not be me, and that's okay. I'm not here to hard sell. I'm here to help you tell your story. And I feel like that's the healthiest way to make this mutually beneficial.
Cool, Steven. Well, thank you so much for joining, man. This was awesome conversation. I can't wait to get this out there and let people hear about all this stuff. This was fantastic conversation. I appreciate it. Well, all right, y'all. That's it for Steven and I for today. I hope we helped shed a little bit of light on mentors and mentor platforms and coaching and all that stuff. Remember, there's a lot of ways out there that you can get help. It doesn't have to be in one specific spot. Diversify where you get help. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, and you'll do great. But curious, anybody out there had success with mentor platforms or anything else or any other thing? I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what's worked for you. Let me know on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. I'm talking about a couple sentences plus the 5 stars. Apple loves that stuff, and so do I. That would help me out so much. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, why don't you tell them about it? That'd be amazing. And if you want to help keep the show independent and ad-free, check out those Patreon sponsorship packages at beyonduxdesign.com/support. And remember, you can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, and John by supporting the show for as little as $3 a month. And there are some sweet, sweet perks like that badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker. You can get a shout out on the show every week. And there's even a package to meet with me for 30 minutes every month. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/audible trial to download User Friendly by Cliff Kwong and Robert Fabricon. Sign up for a free 30-day Audible trial. Cancel at any time, and the book is yours to keep forever. And don't forget, I've partnered with audible.com, so anytime you sign up for a free trial, you'll help support the show. There's no obligation, and you can cancel at any time, and the audiobook is yours to keep forever. So get a free audiobook on me and help support the show. And remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all those past episodes, along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. That's it. I'm done.
Crushing it. Did you feel like we delivered on your vision for this episode?
I don't really have visions. I just talk and see where it goes. That's all.